conversations about
the bottom
water.
line is two smart women talking about something that we're passionate about. So we're good.
Well, and so hi, folks. This is Dr. Kat Schreier from the Water Show, bringing you another one of the great water leaders here at the Water Summit in Milwaukee as part of our special edition coverage. Fabulous program so far. And by the way, please do, if you're watching this anywhere other than thewatershow.org, if you get on over there, you'll be able to see our sponsors who are all from the brew. We decided to have the brew companies as our sponsors. We dropped ridiculously low sponsorship. We still have 2 sponsor slots left, by the way, for any of you other brew folks. Get your fellows on there because you get your own one-on-one as well as full page on your companies, along with all of these speakers.
Oh, very cool.
So we have a little chat box down below. We have a little button that you can download information and that kind of thing. So
max it out.
Absolutely. So this conference has been, it's been really interesting the way, the difference from a lot of other conferences. Absolutely. In that it's all plenary sessions, everybody involved, good number of questions from the audience. It would be nice to have more, I'm sure, but yeah. They really kind of thought through certain issues that they wanted to cover.
Absolutely. It's well prepared. It's a really smart design. Kat, I do conferences in public health around the country. I'm the founder of. Do I talk to you guys or do I talk to you? No, it doesn't matter. I'm talking to you guys. Folks. I'm the founder of a public health organization called City Match. That's CITYMATCH, and it looks at the health of women and children, families and fathers in the 200 largest cities of America. And in doing so, you get to figure out what works, what doesn't, why, and you bring people together to try to get the best out there into practice so that we can have better results, right? So I've been doing conferences for over 25 years. This is a smart design. So I really want to reinforce what Kat's saying, that, and inviting Charles Fishman, the author of The Big Thirst, as well as a journalist with Fast Company and otherwise, to come in. He's done his homework. He also has published books. And so he's able to be the glue and weave us through. And then we have the privilege of coming up and doing more talk show style, some of the hardest questions, and they haven't seen like a single PowerPoint.
and that's really been something that I've been trying to evolve into, and Charles has really been fabulous as a mentor for me, and as I've shifted from 25 years doing water planning and policy, where I would, when I'd have a planning meeting and try to bring together cities and farmers and
right, exactly.
Poor neighborhoods and rich neighborhoods, and people used to have to check guns at the door into conversation or develop events to have a story arc, just like we would in entertainment. What we talk about is watertainment. So we talk about water news, education, and watertainment. Okay. How do we really bring a cohesive conversation together over a story arc within an event like this?
And I would just add to that it's my hope that, and I think this is something that the Water Council is really good at, and that the Water Summit can do, is it's great to have conversation and find that idea that sparks you, but the real key is how is it going to change things. So this really is about the cross-fertilization, so that we can actually get better results for accessible water that's in abundance and that's safe.
Right. Well, and so having done many events like this, and dealing with a lot of, having such deep knowledge and understanding of water issues, there is something that I did notice as being absent within the dialogues and within
so far
the 10, and just looking ahead at the 10 faces.
So what do you see as missing?
Here.
Got it.
Not a lot of color.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we do have more gender balance than we've had in the past. I really don't want to be pointing fingers or making accusations or anything. It's just, it's something to be conscious of. The idea that we need to be blind, race blind, gender blind, right. that it does make a difference when we're serving the public, what faces we present.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, being a public health practitioner, scientist, educator, advocate, partner, as I talked about in my time with my panel this morning on health, public health has four things that makes it public health. And the last one is that public health is explicitly about social and environmental justice. And you cannot get to the arc of justice, particularly environmental justice, of which water is an essential part, without addressing the underlying upstream social and environmental determinants of health. And so with that, and here we are in what has been called the most hyper-segregated city in America. There is greater segregation, I'm talking about structural segregation, in terms of residential living in this metropolitan area than in any other city in America. So, and given that the disparities, at least on the health side, I consider myself a health leader, not a water leader, but how silly to differentiate, given that the two have to come like this. Either way, we know that to not speak truth to power around the underlying issues of equity and justice, including racial equity, and how that manifests, is a missing piece. That said, this is an industry meeting, and it's an industry-driven meeting in partnership with public sector. And I've come to truly believe that we start where we are.
Right.
And so raising awareness to try to then change the narrative will be something we can do. There was something said, Kat, in the second panel today from Maureen from San Diego, brilliant woman working on the front lines.
We've done this whole thing, where are the women water utility leaders for years, putting dots on the map. Back when people couldn't name, one of my first big interviews with Pat Mulroy from Las Vegas, and we talked about her history as one of the first women to lead a major water utility, perhaps the first.
Right.
And we tried to name other women water utility leaders, and came up maybe half a dozen, and we started this quest. And now we've got, the country's covered. There's so much progress, and it's something to celebrate, not to ignore.
And so I think that one of the points that the water utility leader from San Diego said is very much what's often said in the public health world, that a third to a half of all current public health practitioners are nearing or at retirement. So what's the next generation of professionals and leaders in the field? And if we've pipelined correctly, probably not a great metaphor here, if we've waterlined correctly, then we've got the flow of another set of leaders. And so I'm really excited when I look around as the founding dean of the first public health school here in Wisconsin, and knowing that the diversity of our students is right there, most of them from Milwaukee, and they will work side by side with water leaders for the next generation, and that will inspire me. So the fact that today is predominantly, overwhelmingly a white audience, I say that that's the current status. The real question is here.
Because
in this meeting
last week I was at the One Water Summit, which is innovative folks from water, wastewater, public and private,
exactly,
all over the country, and it happened to be in Atlanta, cradle of the civil rights movement, with a Black mayor, with so much Black leadership, and it wasn't just that, but there were so many of the panels were focusing on race, equity, affordability, and it was acknowledged. It's not to say that we're pointing fingers or anything. It's just that the consciousness needs to be of where does that come into play in the delivery of water technology, of water finance. Yes, money knows no race. Yes, technology, molecules know no race. And yet, when it comes to delivering within the public, if we're trying to shy away from racial discussions because they're difficult conversations.
I don't think that folks are shied away. I just think it's just not necessarily the leading edge, and which is ironic because in my public health world here, you cannot have a conversation appropriately without bringing up health equity, because it's public health, health equity, And you can't get at health equity unless you get to racial equity. So the issues of color are not always on the front end of the designers. And I think one of the lessons that we can learn, and I think you've been provocative, I've tried to ask hard questions so far, is to then shift the consciousness and says, where do we bring in essentially the social factors, the underlying upstream determinants in water systems, the same way that we've shifted that upstream determinant around health. You cannot go to a health meeting now without hearing about health equity or about upstream determinants. It has become from a movement of raising that consciousness. I'm not sure that the water folks have been there yet, but maybe if water and public health come together, it'll be one of the ways that we can find greater strength together. So I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah, I think it will be a benefit. And, we're getting ready to go to one of the 2 largest meetings on water in the country next week in Chicago. It's the American Water Works Association annual conference and exposition. I have been there every year, I think, since the 90s. And usually when the women's session comes up, well, it's just a networking session. Sometimes they'll get some technical papers about shifts that are happening in the industry, glass ceiling, or what does it do when Marcia St. Pierre from New Orleans was head of the water utility as a Black woman at a time when race, during Hurricane Katrina. That matters. It matters to see. It's not just about the lower income. It's about leadership and being able to present a face that looks like the population being served, especially during times of resilience, especially during times of crisis. Not to say, here's a crisis, let's roll out the woman, let's roll out the
one of the points that I raised today in the health session was when you have failures of systems, you have loss of life, but you also have loss of confidence.
Exactly.
And so inherent to that is to ask what builds confidence in this case, in water systems, public and private, given that it's a hybrid of the larger landscape. So my hope is that by being part of the design of gatherings, you can influence. Subsidizing the cost to participate. I spoke with a number of people here in town who said that there really wasn't an opportunity, much like the water rates are high. This is a professional meeting aimed at industry primarily. And
it benefits the industry.
And that's, it is what it is. I'm not going to sleep over that. What I can do is say, okay, in the 10th anniversary next year, given that they did invite the EPA leader Joel talked about equity, I talked about equity, Marilyn talked about equity. It's and so how do we manifest a place for that conversation when that really hasn't necessarily been part of the agenda? So it really determines who gets to set the agenda, and I think we have a way.
It's an evolving organization.
Exactly.
These things happen over time. And just kind of clarify where I came from. Part of why I got a little impassioned. So someone with an engineering background, I try to be rational, but as I move more and more into media, realizing that there are times to really tap into that and recognize it. As I said, we've been working on our summer or 6 sexy topics of the summer season, and one of them being Flint. And I actually got reamed for using the word sexy to describe Flint as a racial issue, and tried to explain. Well, it's sexy meaning that it's an issue that people are aware of, that's top of mind, that people are attracted to.
But the underlying sensitivities are understandably high. And I would just say to your audience that as a white woman of privilege, it is my duty and responsibility to use my power in a way that opens the conversation. And so I believe that you're trying to do that as well.
And also even more than that, I mean, the fact that I grew up in North Jersey, Montclair, shortly after race riots had rocked the region, and attended one of the first magnet schools in the country, probably about 80% Black. And so every month with Black History Month, yes, for the national anthem, you might hear lift every voice and sing.
It's part of your social
It's part
DNA.
of who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
And for people to see me externally and assume a privileged, white liberal who
and the reality is, though, that we do have privilege. And so, all I'm saying is that I think we have influence and relationships as opposed to leading, for me, leading with it as an intellectual, which is not what you're saying, but leading it as sort of a larger systems movement piece. The reality is right here in Milwaukee, the future of water is being shaped. And I take seriously my invitation and opportunity to influence the shapers of this particular summit. And I will predict that it will change.
We'll see some changes
over time, because
and that race issues are not just issues for Black leaders, and that women's issues are not just issues for women leaders, and that
it's about the diversity of our community and the justice that needs to underlie the conversation that you're going to have with some of the folks on the panel just now about who pays?
Affordability issues.
Who pays? But at the end of the day, one of the questions that I'll throw back to your listeners and to you as we come to sort of our time here is, one of the challenges that we're having in health, and take a look at the Affordable Care Act, take a look at healthcare access, and take a look at a Hillary versus Bernie piece at this moment before the final primaries, is health a right, or is health a privilege? And should there be universal access to health and in all its dimensions, and including quality health care and its extenders? One needs to ask, and I'm not in the water circles enough in this country to ask the same question, is water a commodity for sale, or is water a universal right to safe, accessible, affordable water, given that it is essentially the fluid of vitality?
Well,
so I just wanted to put that out there, because
there were some really innovative solutions to that particular question last week. Looking at how in places like Israel they have water stamps like we have food stamps. You don't expect to have food for free. You still, the producers of food are still compensated.
Right, but there are vouchers, or there are subsidies. There are ways of leveling the playing field of access, and that. So I'm not looking at full public sector takeover of all water, but I do think the question is to focus on the end, not the means. And at the end, everyone, like we say in public health, everyone, every day, everywhere, should have two things: equal access, equal chances is what I call it, and fullest choices to be healthy and well, and to live long and healthy from generation to generation. So I could just substitute the word water for health. Absolutely. And so I listen today and hear
it applies here as much as abroad.
If we can go to triple aim of healthcare, we can go to the triple aim of water. Absolutely. And I just think we can borrow some language from the health equity folks to the world of water equity. And that's where I look forward to seeing where that goes.
Fabulous. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And if you're watching this anywhere other than thewatershow.org, please do head on over there and see all of our great videos and coverage of the Water Summit here in Milwaukee this week. And then the American Water Works Association annual conference and exposition, the Big Kahuna. 12,000 of my closest friends in water will be there next week. Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you.